This is The Guardian.
Hello, I'm Faye Carruthers and welcome to The Guardian Women's Football Weekly. A tale of two halves is the cliche, but it was a tale of two matches for the Lionesses. A Nations League doubleheader against Belgium that started with a rich chocolate sundae, complete with waffles, cherry and sprinkles, and ended in a bit of a sloppy mess. Is the Dendreef cursed for England? We'll discuss that, round up the rest of the international action, as well as gearing up for a World Cup on home soil in 10 years' time. All that, plus we'll take your questions, and that's today's Guardian Women's Football Weekly. Well, Suzy Wrack, in your men's mind, you must be utterly delighted. I should have stuck rice somewhere into that intro just for you after Arsenal's Champions League win last night.
Can you swap sprinkles for rice? I'm not sure it'd work, on a waffle, but, we could go with it.
Yeah, we might do. Listen, this is a very international pod coming at you today. I am in Madrid. Tom, Garry, I'm assuming you're in Belgium.
You find me in the glamorous setting of a departure gate at Brussels airport. Yes, after covering England's game last night. So, although I'm not in quite as glamorous a setting as our esteemed colleague Sophie, who, thanks to her commitment to covering every single overseas England match for under 17s, under 19s, under 23s, you name it. She's flown so much, she's in the lounge. Whereas I'm in peasant class today. I really am. So we're quite close to one another, but we can't actually see each other. I'm sort of waving down the video call at our dear friend who's somewhere else in the lovely part of the airport as I sit in very much peasant class.
Well, we normally talk about headwear that Sophie Downey wears, and today she's in her tiara, sitting on her throne in the lounge.
That's me all over, Sophie.
I know.
Princess.
Total princess. Oh, gosh. Dear me. I hate it when you have to play the same opponent twice. Like we were talking about Chelsea, Manchester City and the I can't even remember what we called it, the quadrilogy. And now it was a double header against Belgium. Same opponent, same competition in the Nations League. And this is how it ended, because this is the penultimate international window, you'll remember, before this summer's European Championships. And they had to play Belgium twice within this. So we'll start in chronological order, because that makes sense. Friday night at Bristol, England delighted the sold-out Ashton Gate with a brilliant display of attacking football, and it finished England 5, Belgium 0. There were goals from Lucy Bronze, Millie Bright, Aggie Beaver-Jones, Jess Park, and Kira Walsh getting her first ever England goal, would you believe, after 80-odd caps. It was such an impressive night for the Lionesses, Suzy, especially off the back of that really important win over Spain back in February. How did they get the job done?
Yeah, it was great. It felt like a bit of a turning point. I mean, just everything about it was great. The atmosphere was jumping, and I've always been a massive advocate for playing like a Wembley as much as humanly possible and mirroring what the men do. But actually, I think the men should mirror. I kind of switched a little bit and thought the men should do what the women do more and play some of those games that aren't the Spain's, USA's, Germany's, etc. equivalents, outside of Wembley, because the atmosphere was just so brilliant. It was electric, and I think that played a big part as well in the result and the manner of the performance and the intensity and the way it was maintained sort of throughout too. But yeah, just phenomenally good. The right side in particular was just so strong, and I mean there was kind of fortune in that Tessa Willart wasn't in the side, and as we know, she goes on to become an important part of this story. But England were just unplayable, which was really, really nice to see. And I thought contrasted well with the game, matched well with the game against Spain, beating the world champions and then a team that will kind of sit back a little bit more defensively back to back, although then undone. But
it's so difficult, isn't it, to analyse both games knowing what happened
exactly
last night. Sarina Weigman did make one change to the team. Beth Mead came in to link up with Lucy Bronze down the right-hand side, Soph, and actually both of them had a really important impact in that first game.
Yeah, I think the experience showed for them down that right side. Both of them really linked up very, very well. Lucy Bronze, I mean, my God, she's like the Benjamin Button career, isn't she? She just seems to get younger with every game that she plays. She'll still be playing by 2035, I think, at this rate. But yeah, I think they linked up really well, and I think that was really, really positive for England. Everything that was good was coming down that right side for them. It was really, really strong. And the way that they utilised Kira Walsh and Kira Walsh and Grace Clinton, the way that they utilised Kira Walsh and Grace Clinton to fill in when Beth Mead came inside and cut inside and inverted, really showed kind of the options that they have going forward. And I think Beth Mead is so direct with her crossing in terms of her delivery. She's so accurate as well. Lucy Bronze as well. She assisted 2 goals and scored 1. So a really good night for all of that right side.
Yeah, Sarina Weigman did say that she felt something was happening with the way that England were playing. She said, at moments I thought we made football look a little bit simple. Was it one of the most complete performances we've seen from England in a while, Tom?
I think it was the most impressive performance with the ball that we've seen from them since the World Cup and maybe since the Euros. I think on Friday, the whole thing felt very sort of summer 2022. There was that lovely atmosphere at Ashton Gate, the crowd really getting into it. And you had so many players who were central to that success in 2022 on really good form, whether that was Mead or Walsh. But I think what it really showed, probably not just Belgium, but every other team that could play England in the coming months, just it was a reminder of the dangers of what England can do if you give them time and space on the ball, and particularly as Belgium did, if you allow Kira Walsh to have time and space to dictate the passing and play the through balls, that she's so dangerous, and England becomes so dangerous. Mead had lots of space as well, and I think it was perhaps something we've not seen very much of since the World Cup, where England have found opponents are giving them less and less space, but Belgium, for whatever reason, that England found lots of space and freedom and time. And when they get that, this was a reminder that they are still really lethal and one of the best attacking forces out there when they get that time and space. Of course, as we know, they are very Jekyll and Hyde at the moment, though, aren't they, England? So it was all with that caveat. But if we were, as of Friday, things looked very, very rosy indeed. And then, of course, injuries came. Lauren James leaving the camp. Of course, we already knew Chloe Kelly had the injury as well. And I think the momentum seemed to stutter as soon as we got to full time, really, because the bad news started trickling through from the game through to Tuesday.
Yeah, both Lauren James and Alessia Russo went back to their clubs for rehab on injuries that they'd picked up, which is a worry going forward. We'll talk about the impact that then had. Substitutes impacted the game though, Suzy, which was good, and Tom mentioned the success of Euro 2022. That was a large part of it, wasn't it? But it's fair to say that strength in depth is developing, or I would have said that on Friday, and now I'm slightly questioning whether or not that is true.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at that game in isolation, right, and don't think ahead a few days, I was very excited by the impact of Aggie Beever-Jones and Jess Park in particular, because, like Tom said, there was a real sort of Euro 2022 vibe about the game as a whole. I felt like one of the aspects of that was the impact of Park and Aggie off the bench. Obviously during the Euros, England had the luxury of being able to stick to the same starting 11 throughout that tournament, then had Alessia Russo and Ella Toone as the super subs that came on in almost every single game, were really, really impactful. And I felt a bit of that vibe from that Aggie Beever-Jones and Jess Park partnership coming off the bench, albeit at different times of the second half, that they both got on the score sheet and injected some energy into the game at a point where it was needed. We'd just seen Belgium have 2 sort of chances back to back in sort of quite quick succession, a couple of minutes apart. And then they come on and, Aggie scores, and it kind of puts that scoreline that little bit further out of reach and dulls that fight back. So like, yeah, I thought that was quite exciting, and has potential. I think we need to see those players get more minutes ideally in the run up to the Euros, but like there was just an echo of that vibe. Although then I asked Sarina about it and she completely shat on it. So you know, we can't necessarily read too much into it, but yeah, she said the team has changed, everything's changed, formations are changing, blah blah blah, which is all true, but that, you know, doesn't necessarily mean that they won't revert to a more similar formula come the Euros.
Come on, Sarina, get with the narrative. We want the magic of the 2022 narrative, please, leading in. We did get a little bit of special stardust, though, didn't we? Aggie Beever-Jones, you mentioned there, and Kira Walsh, as I said at the top, with their first goals for their country, which is a special moment for any player, Soph.
Yeah, for sure. And for Aggie Beever-Jones, I think it was really important to get that first goal kind of off her back. You know, you can kind of weight off her shoulders now. It's no longer hanging over her in terms of what she can do for England. I think for Kira as well, a really special moment. And I think Sarina afterwards said we're trying to urge her to shoot more. I thought it was really interesting the way that they used her on Friday, because I think for so often in recent games, she's been boxed out of games in terms of, you know, the opposition know that she's through which England play. So they kind of mark her out of the games, and we struggle to get her influential. And I thought on Friday, moving her around, getting her out on the right side, getting her shifting a bit forward was a really clever way of getting her involved in the games. And I guess the goal kind of shows that. I would also say on the point about, like, I do think we need to really consider this game. I know what happened yesterday happened, but it was a really complete performance from England. And I think it still needs the credit where it's due, because if that's what England can play like and they can get that consistently, then you're in for a pretty exciting time this summer. I guess it's easy to let our judgment be clouded by what happened last night, but I think trying to treat that game in isolation in a way, in terms of what we learnt from it, I think it gave us a really good idea of maybe, as Suzy said, Sarina won't admit it probably, but that she probably knows her starting lineup now, I think, for the summer, and she knows the players that will impact off the bench, and I think that confirmed it on Friday, and it confirmed it last night as well.
Yeah, I agree. And listen, we're a very positive pod, and we were all getting excited, having been a little bit uncertain, I think it's fair to say, about how England would be going into the Euros, not necessarily on the best form. This has probably put question marks in, because, you know, we'll talk about Tuesday night's game now. We are recording on a Wednesday, which is very rare for us, because we wanted to make sure that we were talking about this game. Literally 4 days in between them, and it was a completely different story. It finished Belgium 3, England 2, and Belgium actually went into a 3-goal lead. It was 2 goals from Tessa Vullard and a header from Justine van Hevermaet. Beth Mead did pull a goal back from the penalty spot just before the break. And Michelle Aguimang made it a really tense finale, and we'll talk about her phenomenal goal on debut at 19 years old in a second. But Tom, it was a real contrast, wasn't it, compared to that game we've just been discussing in Bristol. What did you make of the performance, and particularly the defensive frailty in that opening half an hour?
Yeah, very worrying for England, and a real feeling of deja vu here, actually. The same scoreline, 3-2, at the same stadium as the last time England were here 18 months ago in Leuven. And the same problems with England not being able to deal with the pace of Belgium on the myself and a couple of other members of the media, nearly 3 hours to get through the passport control at Brussels airport on Monday. But not quite as bad as that. But it did take England more than half an hour to kind of really get into this game. I mean, it was like they were sort of even waiting to enter the field of play. In defensive point of view, they hadn't really done anything significant defensively until we got to the kind of the 32nd or 33rd minute. Very worrying with that side of the game. Going forward, lots to be positive about in the second half. I think England played a very good second half overall, but by that point, Belgium could afford to be very deep, to be very compact, to sit really tight. And all the damage had been done in that first half. One simple ball over the top, got in behind Niamh Charles and Millie Bright for the first goal. You know, a simple set piece for the second goal that England's coaches must have been tearing their hair out about. And then the third goal, again, all playing through England far too easily, and for Villa to get to beat Millie Bright to that ball into the box again, all felt a little bit too simple. And I think, listen, there are pros and cons to this camp for England, as we know, but that's the 5th time England have lost since the World Cup final in 22 matches. And I would say probably the 7th or 8th disappointing performance in those 22 as well. And they've really been, we've seen the two extremes. We've seen them be fantastic against Spain. We've seen them be fantastic at home to Belgium. Great performances like winning away in France, the thrashing of Scotland at Hampden Park, for example. But then we are also seeing this inconsistency, this frailty and real vulnerability to the counter-attack. So, which was also evident against Germany, if you remember how much they found it difficult when Germany counter-attacked. And Sarina Weigman said afterwards she wasn't concerned. She said it's all part of the learning process. I personally would be a bit more concerned. I think that this is a recurring theme. So, these performances are there if England are not really on it, that they're very vulnerable.
With my GCSE maths head on, that's over a third of games. That's quite big. If you look at that in a tournament setting, you're not going to reach a final, or you're going to have an incredible amount of luck. It's interesting, actually, Suzy, that Tom mentions the learnings that Sarina Weigman said. And much as I don't really like playing the same team back to back, I actually think it's fascinating from a coaching point of view what you can take from it. What do you think her biggest learnings are going to be?
Before that, I'm not overly worried about the sort of percentage of games they've struggled in versus then when you hit a major tournament, if you kind of have the same level of games sort of lost, drawn, struggled in, blah blah, that's going to cause a problem, because major tournaments are so different, right? Once you hit the major tournament, you've sort of got all of that out of your system a little bit, and things look quite different. So I'm not totally worried about that. It is cliched, you learn more in defeat than you do in victory. There's quite a lot they can take from this game, in particularly defensively, the fact that obviously they've got injuries, and that to a certain extent is an excuse. None of those injuries were to the back line or to the more defensive pair of the midfield as well, in terms of Clinton and Walsh. All of those, the entire back 7, if you include Hampton, Clinton and Walsh, and the back 4, were unchanged from the game the other day. So that is a concern for me, in that whether it's complacency or a lack of cohesion. I wonder if playing away has an impact as well. The crowd was so strong in Bristol, and such a vibrant part of it, and I really felt like the players fed off the crowd, that you do then wonder what the impact of an away crowd versus that has at kind of not necessarily keeping you on it 24/7 of a match. So for me, one of the learnings is that whilst that is likely your starting back line, there's got to be some concerns about how quickly that or how slowly that took to get going. And then I also I think another learning was options off the bench, and being a little bit more creative in the options you have available to you. I mean, Sarina's stuck quite resolutely to a sort of kind of key pool of players that she's pulled from, and having Michelle Agamang in the mix by default, essentially, because of Alessia Russo getting injured and her coming up from the 19s, I think was huge. I mean, what super talent, which anyone who sort of followed her journey with England and Arsenal at youth levels knows that she's prodigious. But yeah, to have that impact kind of so quickly into her senior debut that she wasn't even meant to be making in this camp, I think is a bit of a shout for variety, and for looking a little bit beyond, and that there is talent outside the pre-existing sort of core pool that they look at that can add a level of unpredictability that I think they've maybe been lacking a little bit since the Euros and since the World Cup.
Yeah, look, I was about to talk about Hannah Hampton, but I think you've perfectly teed up a chat about Michelle Agamang, because, I mean, the way she took the goal for a start was just absolutely brilliant, onto the chest and then a volley. 41 seconds after she came on. Which is, I was amused by all the tweets of people saying, well done, Michelle Agmian, coming on for your England debut. And she scored. Like, it was one of those, which was just an absolute delight to see. And actually, you know, making a real impact is vital. Maybe, Sophie, it's fair to say she put the cat amongst the pigeons a little bit in terms of Sarina Weigman's summer selection plans.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. She is a really special talent. There's no doubt about that. I do think I don't want to go down like the conventional path that we do with England, where we go hype up the youngsters so much that, you know, it gets too much pressure for them. But she is. I've watched her since she was, you know, in the under-17s all the way through. I saw her in the under-19s on Saturday afternoon, scoring for the under-19s, and then she's suddenly scoring for England seniors 4 days later, which is a bit mad. But yeah, she's an incredible talent. I think it's going to be interesting what they do this summer. I think she's a really good option. But England under-19s are playing in the Euros this summer in June, and how they use her because they need her, because that Euros qualifies for a World Cup. So it's really about loading and balance and figuring out whether you just take her and, yeah, you might use her 5 minutes here and there, but she's there for the experience more than anything, and kind of one of those squad players. I think going back to the kind of learnings a bit, England's left side was really the problem all the way through that game in that first half. And it was what caused the problems all over the pitch. They couldn't... Aggie Beaver-Jones is a brilliant young player, but she is not like the kind of Beth Mead or Lauren Hemp kind of player that will work to get back all the time. And it kind of left Niamh Charles and Millie Bright quite exposed when Tessa Willock was down that side with her pace. So I think there was a lot of learnings in that. I think Toon changed the game when she came on, and Ella Toon gets a lot of criticism from a lot of quarters generally, but I think she showed why she's England's starting number 10, because her off the ball work, the way that she hassles and harries in that midfield, does not allow the spaces that, you know, Belgium were afforded in that first half. So she kind of changed that game. So I think those were the key learnings, where I think Jess Park is that kind of technical flair player who you bring on for that impact at this moment in time, when your opposition is tiring a bit. So I think those were also key learnings. I think that's worth pointing out. I do think you learn a lot in defeat. I think that game solidified very much in Sarina Weigman's mind. I would imagine she probably won't admit it, but who she's taking in the summer and who she's not. Yeah,
the question still remains, though, of who's going to be her number one goalkeeper, because the decision to keep Hannah Hampton in goal seemed interesting. Tom, she was asked about the choice as well, and this was her response: I have two world-class goalkeepers. At the moment, Hannah is a little bit ahead. Does that make her number one for the summer? Is Hannah Hampton a little bit ahead of Mary Earps, in your opinion?
I think in Sarina Weigman's mind now, we've just seen the strongest indication yet that Hannah Hampton is now the number one. 3 games in a row to have started when Mary Earps was available for all 3 as well. That's a real shift, and I think it's now reached a stage when I think we'd be very surprised if Hannah Hampton isn't starting that opening game against France. She did have a run of games last summer, but then of course Earps had a bit of a knock. But I think this run now with the Spain game and the 2 games against Belgium in a row, with Hampton getting the jersey, I think that probably answers the question now. And I think, and actually, I've kind of personally had very little preference. I think they both bring a lot to the team, but part of me now hopes that Hampton does get stuck with for the May and June fixtures, because what England need most of all now is probably that continuity. So that might sound really harsh to Mary Earps and Mary Earps supporters out there, but I almost come into it thinking, well, I don't mind which of them they choose. They're both excellent, but whoever it is now needs a run of games, because the back four and the goalkeeper need that cohesion. So I sort of hope that this, barring any injuries, is the end of the saga between now and the Euros, because England need that bit of
consistency. It's early. Don't you worry. It's very, very early, and you are in an airport terminal. But I knew exactly what you meant.
Can I make a slightly negative point about the learnings, that strange word that lots of coaches use? I agree with the gang here that you can learn a lot from the defeats, but my worry would be that if it was so easy to learn from losing these games, then what did we learn from the 3-2 loss in Belgium 18 months ago? What have we acted on from that result coming here last time to improve. I appreciate it was a slightly different set of players, slightly different set of circumstances, but it did feel like such a moment of deja vu. So it's very easy for Sarina Weigman to say, we'll learn from this. I'm not concerned. It's only April. Well, I felt like that was the tone of things when they lost again 18 months ago, and we're getting closer and closer and closer to the Euros. And yes, the media tournament is different, but this has to be a massive wake-up call for England. They cannot play like this in the Euros, because you'll be going home really early.
I've learnt that I love Leuven because it's just beautiful, but I've also learnt Sophie hates it.
I really hate Leuven, and I think there's a jinx on the ground, and I think that's the sole reason why England can never perform there. I mean, I've been here for 4 or 5 times at this point, and in the last 3 games we've lost 3-2 twice and drawn 3-3 when we've been like the favourites to win every time. So I think there is a jinx. That's what I'm putting it down to. Or maybe I'm the jinx.
Maybe you're the jinx. Maybe. Right, that's it for part 1. You're not the jinx. In part 2, we're going to look at some more Nations League action and discuss the UK being set to host the 2035 World Cup. Welcome back to part 2 of the Guardian Women's Football Weekly. Let's take a look at how some of the other teams got on in their respective Nations League campaigns. Wales continued their competitive start to life in League A, suffered a narrow defeat to Denmark in Cardiff on Friday, but a valuable point away to Sweden. Tom Rianne Wilkinson's side have impressed so far in this campaign, and it feels as if they're building momentum at just the right time.
Hugely impressive, 2 very, very good results that I don't think many people would have expected them to secure, and will probably send out a bit of a message to a lot of people that they're not going to be pushovers in these Euros. I think a lot of people, probably myself included, been guilty of just assuming that they will really, really struggle to get any results in their first couple of games against France and the Netherlands. But on the evidence of the past week, they're really, really capable of doing something, and I think it will just give so much belief internally as well for Wales, that the whole and sort of vindication for everything they're doing on the training ground with Wilkinson. Listen, it's still going to be a really difficult task, but Sweden, for me, despite having a slightly aging team, Sweden remain one of the sort of probably the top 5 or 6 teams in Europe. So drawing away there deserves a huge amount of credit indeed.
Yeah, Northern Ireland a draw away in Bucharest, and then they returned to Belfast to beat Romania by a 1-0. That was their second home win of the campaign. Tanya Oxtoby said she was proud of their resilience, asking them to defend for their lives. I mean, she's got quite a big task, hasn't she, rebuilding the team, and it's not going to happen overnight. But have you seen enough, maybe, Suzy, to think that they're heading in the right direction after a few years without any direction at all?
Yeah, I mean, they're in a really good position in the group in second, 7 points. Like, it's the same as where England are at, obviously, in League B rather than League A. I can't believe you didn't use a clean sheet and no defeat. That's the motto quote, because that's definitely my favourite of Tanya's from after the game. But yeah, like, she's bringing in young players. I think they made 4 changes, all quite youthful, to the starting 11. Like, they are clearly showing signs of progress. They play the same team back to back as England did, drawing the first one, winning the second. They ironed out the any kind of errors they felt from the first. They wanted them to have a little bit more resilience in that defensive third, and coming away from a clean sheet in a game like that they conceded in so soon after their goal in the first game a few days earlier showed that. So you can see, like, the plan is working at the moment. Like, there's real signs of growth, and that it's very, very achievable for them to do well in that group.
Is the plan working for Scotland though, Soph? Because Michael McArdle's Scotland side suffered 2 comprehensive defeats to Germany. But the game that is highlighted is the 6-goal second half capitulation in Wolfsburg on Tuesday. What worrying times if you're a Scotland fan, I think it's fair to say.
It is. I think over the last 18 months we've seen glimpses of Scotland, of what they can be like, and then utter, I don't know, backtracking or going backwards completely. I think they desperately need a permanent manager. That's the one thing that's really going to give them a platform to build on, because at the moment they're kind of just sort of in this interim period where you can never really build. Yes, they can work on things from camp to camp, but until you get a permanent coach in, you can never really instill their ideas or their concepts until that point. I spoke to Jo Potter last week, and she's the manager of Rangers at the moment, and she was saying how important it is for Scotland to start qualifying for tournaments, both for the nation, but also for the league, and vice versa, for the league to be helping and the clubs to be helping Scotland to qualify. And that's been something that's really lacking in recent years. They haven't qualified since 2019 World Cup. There's 2 major tournaments they've missed out on, and they don't really look much closer to being able to kind of get over that hurdle at the moment. They have some absolute quality in their squad. You look at the likes of Caroline Weir and Erin Cuthbert. Those players should be playing in major tournaments left, right and centre, but they just aren't quite as some of their parts at the moment, and it is a worry. I think there is a sort of a neglect from the Scottish FA over years in terms of investment into the squad as well. They've really let them down in that respect, and I think they really need a proper rethink and reset, and I hope that's what they're doing at the moment in making this decision for a permanent coach, because you can't go through another cycle and not qualify for another major tournament. Then you're falling even further behind than you are already, and that's going to be a really real worry for them.
Yeah, without a doubt, and so difficult for those elite players that aren't able to go and showcase their talents on a world or European stage, for sure. Elsewhere, France got a solid win away to Norway. Italy hit 3 past Denmark. Iceland came from 2 goals down to draw 3-3 with Switzerland. Meanwhile, Tom, friend of the pod, Carla Ward, got back to winning ways with the Republic of Ireland. 2 victories over Greece. It was a tough first international window for her and the team, but does it feel as if they're back on track a little bit?
Yeah, and it was always going to take a little bit of time, wasn't it? You maybe need a couple of windows to start to cement your ideas, but Ireland will take a huge amount of confidence from this. This is going to sound like a slightly strange thing to say, but it might actually help Carla Ward and her staff that the Republic of Ireland are in that second tier Nations League cycle right now, to sort of build up that form and build up that belief in the group with shall we say, more winnable games than being in the A League, as the Irish side have been recently. But I don't mean that in a patronising way. I just think of it as an opportunity when you're coming into a new era to start on a positive note and start building up the things that you want to see on the pitch. Then winning really helps. And Greece, they're no pushover, but they're also clearly not of the same calibre of what Ireland were facing just sort of less than a year ago, when they were in that group that contained France and England as well. So, but no, reason for enormous optimism for Carla Ward, and I think that she will be really, really glad to have backed up one. To get one good result's one thing, but to back it up again, unlike England, she'll be a very, very happy woman right now.
I think Carla said herself that she didn't really, she underestimated the kind of impact of the disappointment of that loss to Wales, and how much it's taken mentally and physically out of the players. They lost to Wales, they left camp, the manager changed, and then they were in a new cycle, and they were suddenly having to perform again, and they're suddenly expected to win, whereas Ireland for a long time have been kind of the underdogs, and they're really adjusting to that new role as being, favourites in games. So I think it's taken a little time for them to adjust, and I think it reminded me, I know very different levels of the game, but after coming back from the World Cup final for England, and we look at those games against the Dutch and Belgium, and the performances and the lack of, positivity in the England squad, and I think that was the hangover from that World Cup final. I think we really need to think about, how these games kind of affect players, and kind of understand that it does take groups a bit of time to get rid of the cobwebs, get rid of the mental scars of big disappointments. And I think that's where Ireland were at last camp, and that's why you got those kind of dodgy results. But I think this is a real, as Tom said, a clean slate now, where you've got those 2 results and you can really build from that going into the summer.
Difficult to build when you don't have players to build with, and it feels as if there's been a bit of a trend developing over this international window of injuries. Many international sides have picked up a lot of injuries, and it's raised questions on whether or not there should actually be an international window in April. There isn't one on the men's side of the sport. We're obviously getting in terms of the English domestic season into the conclusion of the WSL and the Championship. What do you think, Suzy? Is it right to have an international window now? We've talked about scheduling so much on this pod already, and I don't think there is a right answer to it. But do you feel as if there's a bit of a trend going, and maybe the authorities need to look at dropping this one?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you look at the two teams in the Champions League from England, and Hermano, Ramirez, James, all out. From an Arsenal point of view, Van Domselaar, Russo, Kelly, Caitlin Ford's got a broken nose. Like, it's massively impacting a key point of the season. I saw a friend of the pod, Tim Stillman, tweeted the men's game got rid of the international break over 2 decades ago now because there was not an acknowledgement that it was such an important part of the club season. Frustrating that key players, not just Arsenal players, are picking up injuries ahead of Champions League semi-finals and league running. And I think it's a really, really pertinent point. Like, you can't have the international game growing at the expense of the domestic game, and or vice versa, right? Like, you've got to find the balance there, and the balance isn't right. You know, we've got 2 windows that really, really don't fit the calendar at the moment. This one coming at such a critical point of a club season, and then this really, really stupid one right on the doorstep of the Euros in June as well. That needs to change where they fit. I mean, I would argue that maybe they should have a window less than they do at the moment, but then where you fit them, I think, has to look very, very different to what it is now. You cannot impact the club season in the way that you are, and you cannot have just ahead of a major tournament your biggest teams essentially playing, in some cases, extremely similar games with the Nations League groups and the Euros groups, in some cases not looking particularly different too. So, huge problems with scheduling and calendar. And as an Arsenal fan, I'm furious. As an England in Europe fan, I'm furious as well with Chelsea's injuries too. Like, we shouldn't be hampering teams like this.
It's just to be devil's advocate. You know, we wanted competitive fixtures though, rather than friendlies. We've got competitive fixtures, and that means that obviously they're not movable. And a large
they
part,
are movable.
Well. They are movable, but you're always going to move them to a part of the season that's going to impact that part of the season. So there's always the argument that which part of the season do you move them to, where it doesn't then become problematic, Tom?
Well, to be honest with you, my own view would be that the windows that need to be removed from the women's international calendar are those Northern Hemisphere summer windows in the years when there is no tournament for the seniors. Last summer, for example, the international window that took place in July 2024 was one of the worst ideas I can recall in the international scheduling for a very, very long time, because that was the one opportunity that, particularly for the European players, the one opportunity they had for a real summer break, particularly if you weren't in the Olympics, a real summer break, and it was completely stolen by that competitive window of very important matches that was in the July, and that's a window that I feel similarly about the competitive games in this May-June window, so close to the major tournament as well. I think that should be almost like a warm-up friendly window at best. But my view on it is the April window is, in terms of player loading, they would still almost certainly be, players would almost certainly be playing, you know, competitive matches anyway. And what we have to be mindful of is that the reason there are extra windows for women's international football compared to men's is because so many countries around the world really rely on the international women's football opportunities to get any kind of meaningful football, you know. But Suzy's so right that for the players in the Champions League and for those top countries, there's a major problem now, because we do have way too much international football. We have at least one window too many every year, and that cannot continue in the long run. But yeah, sorry, just to come back to it, the window that I would prioritise removing would be the summer windows, particularly in those non-tournament years, rather than removing the April one, personally.
I feel like Sophie's got something to say, but I want to ask about whether international managers actually have a little bit of responsibility to take on their shoulders. They've got a job to do. So I think it's a little bit harsh at times because there has been some heavy criticism of how they use their players. Should it be falling all at their door? I mean, obviously not all of the blame at their door. What's your take on it all?
I want the view not. Say, take Sarina Weigman, for example. Her job is to put England in the best possible position for the summer. And she is not thinking about club football. She is thinking about winning the European Championships or backing up a European Championship win. And you can see the criticism that she gets when they lose a game, or when they lose a game and she changes things up, right? But she can't win, because when she wins again, people are complaining about her using her best squad and overloading players. I think a lot of the loading actually comes from the clubs, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, but like Sonia Bonpastor has played Lucy Bronze consistently throughout the season, Millie Bright consistently throughout the season. They're the players who looked really tired last night, and they're the big players that are doing the most of the work at their club games. So I do think the clubs kind of get away with it a little bit in terms of the loading, because you're thinking about the league season. In terms of the other stuff, to play devil's advocate again, we have a 3-week break at Christmas in the winter break, and we either preserve that or we don't. And I think I do understand the loading issue at this time of year, but it's the same every year, and injuries unfortunately do happen in football. I do think there needs to be a lot more care about player loading. I think this edition of the Nations League has been hammed into a 6-month period that it didn't need to be hammed into, and really they could have delayed until the autumn to play this Nations League and allowed this 6-month period for teams to build up, to get the cycle in, to get players playing in friendlies and competitive friendlies. We know that England was set up friendlies with the likes of the USA and stuff like that, so they would be competitive games. You can't call a game against the USA a friendly, really, but it would allow them to try things and try different ways of doing it. And when you're looking at the groups in the summer, as Suzy said, at the moment in England's Nations League group, you have Spain, Belgium and Portugal. They're all in the same group in the Euros in the summer: Spain, Portugal and Belgium. I mean, FIFA have a rule, don't they, I think, that you're not allowed to play an opposition within 3 or 4 months of the same opposition within 3 or 4 months of the competition. And it seems utterly baffling to me that UEFA have allowed this to happen, that by the time the summer comes, Spain, they will have all played each other twice. They will know each other like the back of their hands. It's the same with Sweden and Denmark. They played each other twice in the build-up to this tournament. And it just loses that kind of edge and that kind of excitement, because they're just so attuned to each other. So you can't really, have that kind of what will happen. You know how they're going to play. You know how they're going to set up. And so I think that's a real big error on UEFA's part. And I think anyway what I feel about the Nations League. I won't go into it. I'd scrap the whole thing completely.
I know you
I personally
would.
don't want to win it. I would prefer to come second in the group, and then you have the autumn off where you don't have to play any European matches. You can go and have fun playing the USA or Brazil or wherever you might want to go.
And isn't that bad? I wonder whether any of the players feel like that as well, because you do get into that mindset at times, don't you, if you need a rest. No player should be thinking, I don't want to win a tournament. Let's talk about the 2035 World Cup. It'd be quite fun to win that, wouldn't it? Last week, Gianni Infantino announced at the UEFA Congress that the USA and the UK were set to host the 2031 and 2035 editions of the FIFA Women's World Cup, respectively. Both were the only ones to submit a valid expression of interest, interestingly. And while formal bids still have to be submitted by the winter, the decision is now more of a formality. Look, it is a decade away, but that decade will go very quickly. I can tell you that as an older person. The decade will disappear. But how exciting is it for the World Cup to be coming to the UK for the first time, Suzy?
Yeah, I was delighted until I worked out how old I will be when it comes around. And I should probably be in my grave and not covering women's football at that stage. So that was really, really cheerful. From a momentum point of view, in terms of development of women's football in England, it's obviously brilliant. I think the fact that it's, the first time that England have hosted a World Cup since 1966 men's tournament is kind of insane, really, that it's taken that long for it to come around on either side. So it's really exciting from that point of view, and I bet FIFA will love it because at the moment, the UK and the US are England and the US are the two sort of biggest growth markets in terms of like elite level growth of the game. So like there's real potential there, and you can build real momentum, and you can get a little bit of that sort of like, I call it the like Olympic vibe around a tournament where people just want to be a part of it in any way possible. Like they just want to be involved. So they'll go to the Belgium versus Finland game or whatever it may be, and like will just want to be in that vibe and, you know, kind of experience a bit of the tournament. And you don't necessarily get that in many other ways. So like I think you know, we didn't really see that, for example, at France in 2019 necessarily. We did in Australia big time. People just wanted to be a part of anything that was going on. So I think that's a big bonus for them. But I know, yeah, Tom has written a really, really good piece about the diversity of the hosts, which I think is really interesting, and I'm sure he'll come into at some point.
Yeah, well, let's actually take this email that Jim Hearson sent us on Women's Football Weekly at theguardian.com. Further to Tom's piece on the US and UK being the only bids for the 2031 and 2035 World Cups, is it simply a case of the tournament getting too big too quickly? By boosting the participating nations up to 48, by the way, I forgot to tell you that's what they're doing. By 2031, the number of teams participating will have increased from 32 to 48. FIFA's made a rod for its own back, Jim says, as a country must have at least 16 stadia with 20,000 plus capacity to host the 104 games. Tom mentions an African host in his article. Of the qualifiers in 2023, only South Africa meets that criteria. While there's scope for multiple nations to team up, that's a worse experience for players and fans who have to travel more, but is preferable to FIFA at the moment, as we can see. As well as the environment. That was me, by the way, interjecting that, not Jim. As well as the environment. But as long as it swells FIFA's coffers, those concerns will no doubt be dismissed. Thank you for your email, Jim. Thoughts, Tom?
Yeah, Jim makes some really important points that, hey, listen, these two tournaments will be wonderful for the women's game in so many ways. I've no doubt about that. And I think we have a lot of reason to be excited about them both. But, you know, for the global sport, it's desperately sad that nobody else has you know, wanted to have a crack at this, you know, to not even be able to put in a bid. I think that's extremely sad for the women's game. It does not point very well to, if you look at FAs all around the world, you know, and governments all around the world, to their ambitions for the women's game and the importance they place on trying to host a women's tournament, to not, and I do think South Africa's a really good example, yes, to have not mounted a really strong effort to host this is just desperately sad for the global women's game, and the fact that this tournament has never been to Africa ever, and it's now going to go to the US for a third time before it's been to Africa. The fact that China are the only Asian country to have hosted the competition, so, you know, we're still waiting for the first Women's World Cup to head to Japan or South Korea or the Middle East, of course, as well. You know, let's not forget this is a World Cup, and I think for the Americans in particular to have it for a third time, I think we should be mindful of the fact that the two strongest countries in terms of their domestic women's football offerings in the world right now are only going to get stronger by hosting these two tournaments for the global ecosystem. That's a worry. But no, Jim makes a really good point, and there's a flip side of that argument, isn't it? Is that the players and the fans and everyone involved in the teams deserve the best possible tournament conditions and facilities and stadia that they can possibly get. So all of that is also very important, and in that regard, we probably have the two hosts who deserve this the most. My worry is they need it the least in terms of developing the women's game in their domestic countries.
I think the point on stadium size that Jim makes is a really, really good one as well, and the tournament size, because when you look at the men's South Africa World Cup in 2010, that was a 32-team tournament. So if you're looking at a 48-team tournament for, you know, nations like South Africa or any of the other African countries or some of those Asian countries, the capacity for that number of games is going to be really, really difficult. You know, like even those countries that, you know, you look at South Africa in particular, because they have hosted a Men's World Cup, right? Like they did not host a tournament that big. So then you're immediately hitting roadblocks that are in the way, that require potentially stadium building or like a really kind of convoluted like or like joint bids. You know, we're seeing more and more joint bids like in men's and women's football, and I think that's partly because of this issue of the sizes of both World Cups increasing. I think the World Cup increasing is a good thing to 48 teams. I'm not sure that's quite a large like a substantial increase, but like in terms of location of where you can hold it, you're really, really sort of cutting down the pile. And I guess in a way it's an excuse, right? That suits FIFA, because then they get to stick it in the tournaments that are going to generate the most capital, which at the moment market wise is the England and the US.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, money talks, doesn't it? Always. I think it's important though that all the home nations are involved in the UK's bid in 2035. I think that's very big. Right, last piece of business, because next week sees the launch of a brand new professional league in Canada. The long-awaited Northern Super League kicks off in Vancouver on Thursday morning, UK time. It was just announced that they've secured a landmark deal as well with ESPN Plus, who are going to stream more than 40 matches per season. Exciting times for Canada. So if you are, I feel like you are an honorary Canadian. We're going to cover it more in depth next week, aren't we? But I know how excited you are about it.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I am an honorary Canadian. Having lived there for a little while, it's Vancouver as well is where I kind of, my heart is. So I'm very, very excited for the opening next week. I'm actually going to be there, which is going to be exciting. So I can give you all the goss, the updates on what it's like. But I think for Canadian women's football, it's a huge moment. Casey Stoney spoke about it before one of their games in this camp. You know, for them to establish a professional league, to be able to start bringing players through and being able to provide careers for players, rather than having to send them down. I mean, it's going to take time. We have to clarify it's going to take time. But rather than having them have to go down to the NWSL in America or overseas to Europe to get that professional football, they can now start to build that in country. And it really helps when you're thinking about developing youth and developing pathways, to have the kids being able to come into setups where they can have pro contracts at a young age and stuff like that. It's going to be massive for them. So very exciting. And we'll cover it a bit more yet next week. I'm hoping to get a Canadian on to talk to us about it and tell us all the goss and keep us up to date on what's happening there. But yeah, I would just clarify, it does need to be given time. It's not going to be a success overnight, but I think this TV deal is big, it's huge. It's eyes on the sport, right? And we've seen what's happening in North America in sport anyway, in terms of what we've seen with the basketball and the hockey and the NWSL. So there's a market there for it. So you've got to be pretty excited about what's going to happen.
Yeah, without a doubt. Very much am. Look forward to hearing more about it next week. Everybody get home safe, apart from Suzy, who's the only one of us safely tucked up at home. Try and turn left, Tom, if you can. Just race past Sophie. Nudge her out the way. And go left on the plane.
I'm looking forward to hearing about the luxuries that have been in the lounge when I catch up with Soph next. But yeah, no, safe travels, everyone, and really lovely to speak to you all.
Take care, Soph.
Thanks for having me. I'll never live this down.
Rice, baby, Suzy Wrack.
Rice, baby.
I have something else to tell you, Suze, by the way. It's all down to me, that 3-0 win last night for you, because I did a little tour of the Bernabeu yesterday with my time in Madrid, and I feel like I jinxed Real Madrid just for you and Arsenal.
Can you go and do the tour at the Emirates? Because that would be really, really helpful. I'd really appreciate that. Make that happen, thanks.
All right, okay. I'll book it in next week. See you later, team. Keep having your say by sending in your questions via social media or emailing us at womensfootballweekly@theguardian.com. And as ever, a reminder to sign up for our weekly women's football newsletter. All you need to do is search Moving the Goalposts Sign Up. The Guardian Women's Football Weekly is produced by Sophie Downey and Hattie Moyer. Music composition was by Laura Iredale. Our executive producer is Sal Ahmad.